It is June and it is hot. That means the year is half over, so now is the time to do your mid-year review. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about performing a mid-year review for your church and the 3 areas I think you need to look at. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Church Finance and Minister Tax Podcast. My name is Michelle Brown, and I am honored to be your host. In this podcast, we will discuss topics to help you organize, maximize, and utilize your God-given talents and skills so you can do what you do best, which is take care of the business side of the church with excellence. If you are a church secretary, bookkeeper, administrative assistant, or any other superpower title you've been given, then this podcast is for you. So grab your notebook and pen and your favorite beverage, and let's get ready to learn something cool today. Hello, and welcome to episode 67 of the Church Finance and Minister Tax Podcast. Church finances and minister taxes is what we do, so if that's your area of service, we are here for you and aim to make it easy peasy mac and cheesy. Or if you're from Canada, they say easy peasy pudding and pie. Regardless of where you're from, we are here to help take the confusion and uncertainty out of running the business side of the church and give you the confidence and clarity you've been looking for. We all know why we're here, so let's dive right on in. First, here is today's quote. It is by John Gordon and Alex Demcazk, however you say that name, in their book called The Sale. In the book, it says, a fool thinks only of how his decisions will impact him in the moment, but someone who has wisdom considers the long-term implications of his decisions. I just thought that was good because we don't live in a bubble and our decisions do affect others. All right. So just like some organizations may do an annual performance review on their employees, churches should do a mid-year review on 3 important areas that may need to be adjusted. Your budget, contributions, and Minister Housing Allowance. All right. So we're going to take a look at each one and why you should take a look at these at your church now instead of at the end of the year. So we're going to start with the budget. The word budget is defined as an estimate of income and expenditures for a period of time, a set period of time. That means budgets are not written in stone, people. You can change them when merited, whenever you need to. With most major church activities occurring in the 3rd and 4th quarters of the calendar year, taking a deeper view of your budget numbers mid-year can help a great deal in preparing for those increased expenses. It's going to help you to know, are we on track? Do we have the funds that we need to do all these things that we have planned, or are we behind? Do we need to adjust what we're working on, all right? So a great process to follow is to give each department leader a year-to-date copy of their budget and the expenses with the details, and have them look at their planning schedules for the remainder of the year and see if they're on target or if adjustments need to be made, especially for your children's ministry, your youth ministry, your senior adults may have some things planned. Your deacon ministry may have things planned, staff get-togethers, whatever. Just take a look at it, okay? If adjustments need to be made at this time, simply follow your church's procedures as spelled out in the budget section of your financial policy. Hopefully you have one. And get those budgets made. Again, people get stuck up on budgets. You don't need to, okay? They're fluid. They're just an estimate, all right? It's not written in stone. So look at your budget, see if you need to make any changes before the next half of the year gets here. A second area is contributions. All right, so likely by now you've done a few ministry projects during the first half of the year, all right? So take this opportunity to share the love with your donors. Let them know what you've been doing. Send them a mid-year contribution statement showing their giving year to date, along with a giving supplement sharing some of the ministry projects you've completed already this year. So your contribution statements, they can be mailed out. They can be picked up in the church office. You can email them, or you can direct them to check their online giving portal, such as like if you use Planning Center and all the giving is recorded in Planning Center, you don't have to do any expense. You don't have to do any printing. Just say, hey guys, go check out your giving so far this year. Make sure everything is in there categorized correct, okay? So you can also create an insert for your church bulletin if you still print out physical bulletins, or if you just do slides only, include a slide in your pre-service slides that, that directs them to this. So I'm going to give you an example of what you can say, okay? So you can say, because of your generous giving so far this year, we at First Community Church of Anywhere USA have been able to do the following. And then just list 3 or 4 things that your church has done during the first half of the year, such as we sent 250 students to youth camp in June, okay? We shared the gospel of Jesus Christ with 400 children and adults that participated in this year's VBS. We collected $11,876 for the Annie Armstrong Easter offering that helps support missionaries in North America. And we completed home repairs for 5 of our senior citizens in need. Okay, so it's whatever ministries your church is involved in, whatever outreach your church does. You as a church staff acknowledge that you can only do this because of the giving of your members, and your members need to know, okay, this is where our funds are going. So help your church members to know where their giving is going so that they can get a sense of accomplishment and knowing that their giving is making a difference in others' lives. That's especially huge with millennials now, and the younger generation is they want to see positive change. They want good things to happen, and doing this is just a great habit to get into if you're not already doing it, okay? The third and last area that you really want to check into is your minister's housing allowance, all right? I just received a call this past week from one of my current tax prep clients, and they needed to do certain things to their house, and they're like, can we make the change, or does it have to be everything be done in January? I said, no, absolutely not. If you have not spent the funds for this project yet, this repair that needs to be done, get that approval done as soon as possible so that you can then have that done, okay? So I get lots of calls on this, so we want to make sure that we spend a little time on this. So I cannot speak enough about this topic because it is the most misunderstood benefit that qualified ministers have. The key here is to have all your qualified ministers to review their housing expenses year to date. All right. If nothing out of the ordinary has happened, then that's fine, hunky-dory. Leave it the way it is if you want to. Okay. But in most instances, as we're going to touch on here in just a second, life happens, people. Things just happen, and you need to get those adjustments made. But to review first, according to the IRS, ministers are individuals who are duly ordained, commissioned, or licensed by a religious body constituting a church or a church denomination. All right. Ministers have the authority to conduct religious worship, perform sacerdotal functions, and administer ordinances or sacraments according to the prescribed tenets and practices of that church or denomination. If a church or denomination ordains some ministers and license or commissions others, anyone licensed or commissioned must be able to perform substantially all the religious functions of an ordained minister to be treated as a minister. This is for tax purposes so that the individual is eligible for a housing allowance, all right? So to further clarify what ministerial services are, the IRS states that most services you perform as a minister, priest, rabbi, etc., whatever title you go by, are ministerial services. These services include performing sacerdotal functions, conducting religious worship, and controlling, conducting, and maintaining religious organizations, including religious boards, societies, yada, 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 that are under the authority of a religious body that is a church denomination. You are considered to control, conduct, and maintain a religious organization if you direct, manage, or promote the organization's activities. All right. I know that's a mouthful. Basically, what do pastors do? They preach on Sunday mornings. They share the gospel. They do baptisms. They do They lead the Lord's Supper. They officiate at weddings and funerals. These are ministerial services. All right. So now that we have covered who is a qualified minister for the housing allowance exception, let's see why we need a mid-year review for this item. As I said a while ago, life happens, people. It just does. And it seems to just keep happening more each year. Okay. We've been through spring. We're now going headstrong into summer. Like I said, it's mid to upper 90s here where I live all week this week. So you've no doubt experienced a thunderstorm or two that may have blown off some shingles or downed a tree or two. And maybe now that the temps are in the 90s, you've turned on your AC just to discover that it's not blowing cold air that you were seriously hoping for. All right. You did not plan on these expenses last winter when you set your designated housing allowance amount for the 2024. So now is the time to make that adjustment. All right. Though you cannot get back pay to help cover those amounts, you absolutely can add those expenses into the amount to be designated for the remainder of the year. So I'm going to give you an example. If your housing designation on January 1st of this year was $36,000, all right, that's $3,000 per month, all right. And also remember that housing can be whatever percentage of your overall cash compensation during the year. The IRS does not set a percentage limitation on it. It's just at the end of the year when you go to file your taxes, you only have an allowable amount that you are to exempt as housing allowance. Okay. So we're going to say you did $3,000 a month, so $36,000. Regular housing expenses year to date up through June 1st of this year were $18,000, okay, which means you're right on the money. But windows on your house are 30 years old this year. They've began leaking terribly, and they need replaced in April. Estimated cost to be replaced, $7,000. You're mulling over that. All you got is an estimate. You haven't done anything else, okay? Now, June's here. The AC unit froze up on the very first day the thermometer hit the 90-degree mark in June, and it needs to be replaced ASAP. So you get an estimate on that. There's another $7,000. And you're like, seriously, Lord, this is $14,000 in expenses that I don't have the money for because we didn't plan for them, okay? So both of the above additional costs are estimates only, okay? You've not put a deposit down. You've not given them any money. They're just estimates, because there's a work backlog for both companies that are going to do this work, and they can't get to your needs until the first week of July to do the actual work, okay? So you got the window replacement estimate in April, you got your AC unit went out in June, and they can't get to you till the first week of July. So you've not done anything. So if you were spot on in your designation of $36,000 before these issues, you will have $14,000 more in actual expenses than designated, okay? As you know, the allowable housing exclusion follows the least of three rule. The least of three means that you are allowed to exclude from federal income tax the least of either your designated housing allowance approved by the church, your actual expenses, or the fair rental value of your home fully furnished plus utilities. So in this case, if the minister decided not to do a review to see if any adjustments needed to be made, assuming that the fair rental value plus utilities was greater than the $36,000, then their allowable housing exclusion on their return when they file next spring would only be the $36,000 that was designated, because that was the least of three, okay? But if they took the time to do the review before the end of June and adjusted their housing designation, added in that $14,000 with an effective date of July 1st, they would now then be eligible to include the cost of paying for those repairs, put in the new windows, get in that ice cold air conditioning system, since the designated adjustment was made before the payments were made. All right. So instead of the $3,000 he received for each month from January to June for housing allowance. He's now going to receive $5,333.33 for each month remaining in the calendar year, and the new annual designated housing allowance will be $50,000 instead of the $36,000. All right. So the make or break issue here is that housing allowance is never, ever retroactive when it comes to the expenses you pay. What that means is you can't go back and pick up expenses you've paid and consider them to be a part of your used housing allowance at the end of the year if you exceeded your designated housing allowance at the time you paid them. I know that can be frustrating and confusing, but that's the way the IRS is, okay? So that's why I stressed earlier that the repairs were not paid for when they were occurred, and that the new housing allowance designation was made before the expenses were paid for. So if your minister had paid for the repairs when they occurred, he could not legitimately include those expenses in the housing allowance, because housing allowance is proactive, not retroactive. And breathe. Okay, and this is just another reason why I reiterate, please have a tax professional that understands minister taxes, that understands how the housing allowance works, that can help you to get and take advantage of the greatest tax benefit that ministers are given, which is the housing allowance. Okay, so that is going to wrap up another episode. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that the information provided was informative and insightful, and I pray that it gives you some ideas on how to use the summer as a time to review those 3 important areas of the church. And thank you again for sharing your time with me today. Let's all strive to make an impact and not just an income. And remember to always look your best, do your best, and be your best. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thanks again for listening today. If you haven't joined our free Facebook community yet, check it out at www.facebook.com/groups/church bookkeeping and clergy tax. And please know that no matter what is going on in your part of the world, God's got you, girl. Be blessed, my friend. Bye-bye.